Dear students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am VN Prabhakar, visiting faculty in the Archaeological Sciences Center, IIT Gandhinagar. In this module, we will be learning about the trade and urbanism in the Indus civilization. And I hope by the end of this module, we can be understanding a lot about the trade connected with the urbanism and other aspects of the Indus civilization and how it contributed to the growth, expansion, inter-regional trade and external trade of the Indus civilization. So our main objectives of this module will be to understand the processes leading to the urbanism, how the urban thing came to the Indus civilization, how during the preceding cultures, how it contributed to the ultimate urbanism of the Indus civilization, starting from the earliest, that is the food producing era, and also to understand the inter-regional and external trade of the Indus civilization. There are various aspects which are responsible for the urbanism in the Indus civilization. It had a very long beginning, starting from the Mehergad, starting from the earliest food producing stages when the human, they started to settle down on the banks of the river Bolan at the site known as Mehergad, which has yielded remarkable evidence starting from the Aceramic phase, when the early humans did not domesticate plants and animals. They were only dependent upon the wild animals and wild cereals, whatever available growing along the river banks. But later, they gradually domesticated the plants and animals. Their shift from the wild animals to the domesticated animals, it grew. They understood the importance of the domestication of plants and animals because it provided a continuous supply of food material throughout the year. They were no longer dependent upon going for and hunting. They're no longer depending upon collecting cereals from the forests, but now they can cultivate, they can irrigate their fields, they can grow a wide variety of cereals, pulses and other materials, and also they can domesticate cattle and sheep, goat and all these animals, and they can have a continuous food supply throughout the year. And in this very early stages itself, we see evidence of long distance trade at the Mehergad. I mean, we can see the presence of materials like turquoise, shell, all these things, they are coming from far away distance because they are not available locally. For example, shell at Mehergad, they came from the coast of Karachi, which is nearly 500 kilometers south of Mehergad. Another variety of shell, it came from Oman, which is another 500 to 1000 kilometers away from Karachi itself. So during these earlier stages itself, they were engaged in long distance trade. They had contacts with cultures, other cultures which were producing some exotic materials, and they supplied to the interior sites like Mehergad. Later, it also led to the development of new technology because depending upon other cultures alone cannot help. They have to produce their own kind of technology. So that's how the ceramic technology, it grew. Also along with that, several other technologies related to the pyrotechnology, that is control of fire. They were heating stone objects, they were heating steatite to produce a distinct material that was unique to certain culture. So again, controlling the trade networks which led to the ultimate urbanism, because the controlling of the raw materials is an important aspect, because procuring raw materials from far away distance, then supplying to the inland cities, and how it can be manufactured and processed into various kind of finished products, it also helped a lot in the emergence of urbanism. The state, the ruling class or the trader community, they felt the necessity that to control these aspects, they helped in a lot in gaining control to the long distance trade. Controlling the raw material sources, it also helped certain communities to grow into prominence. Some guilds, some merchant communities, they grew into prominence by controlling these raw material sources, and ultimately complexities grew because of the urbanism, and several classes of societies came into being, and ultimately all other materials, they were properly channelized. They were procured from the raw material sources, distributed to the various cities, distributed to the various manufacturing centers, and ultimately the kind of urbanism, the kind of various levels of hierarchy, it grew. In the next slide, we can see a growth in the procurement of raw materials, beautifully compiled by an archaeologist known as Randall Law from the site of Harappa. How from the earliest stages onwards to the late Harappan stage, how the initial stages they were having access to only the raw material sources from the nearby areas, and gradually it spread to all other sources available from far distance because of the necessity, because of the importance of the other raw materials that were required to maintain a social status. It was necessary, so they had to venture into faraway regions, and they were procuring raw materials from faraway regions during the classical urban stage. We can see from this slide how the nearby sources were exploited during the early Harappan stage. Then during the mature Harappan stage, all raw material sources surrounding the entire Indus civilization area, they were procuring them and they were distributing them. And for this, they had established a very good network, very good systematic settlement pattern. There were larger cities at regular intervals like Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, Channu-daro, Rakhigadi and Dholavira, supplemented by smaller towns and villages, and all they were distributed all along the trade networks, so that the procurement of the raw materials becomes very easy, the control becomes very easy, and it kind of created a very good kind of competitive imbalance, one can say, because certain raw materials are available in Gujarat, certain raw materials are available in Balochistan, certain raw materials are available in northern Pakistan. So these kind of raw materials, they have to be intertraded. Certain regions supplying raw materials like steatite was supplied from northern Pakistan to Gujarat. Gujarat was supplying cornelian and agate to the northern sources. So a certain imbalance was there, but also it helped in a competitive mechanism. So that's how the trade grew, the economy grew. Also, it was an important component for the overall integration of the Indus civilization. And for this, transport was a very important component. Without an effective transport mechanism, one cannot trade well. One of the leading archaeologists, Jonathan Mark-Canoyer, he identified 4 major spheres of interaction and exchange in the Indus region. The first one is the southern Indus plain and adjacent western highlands. The southern Indus plain means the modern Sindh area, and the western highlands are the Balochistan and the Makran coast. The second is the islands of Kutch, Saurashtra and mainland Gujarat, the modern islands of Kutch Peninsula, then the Saurashtra Peninsula and the mainland Gujarat, consisting the important sites being the Dholavira, Lothal, Rojdi and all other sites. The third region is the northern Indus and Saraswati river valleys, comprising broadly the modern Punjab, Haryana and Rajasthan. And the fourth one is the highland valleys of Balochistan and Afghanistan, the northern Balochistan region and Afghanistan up to Shotugai, where lapis lazuli was extensively exploited. What are the evidences for the internal transport networks? If we look into the archaeological evidence, we have large number of evidences coming from the material culture of several sites. Like we can see the kind of toy cart frames. They are very good examples. The complete example of a toy cart frame, the hollow toy cart frame, indicates the kind of curvilinear structure supported by frames, wooden frames, and they are composed of either a open carriage structure or a closed carriage structure, depending upon the commodity which is being transported. If it is a very important commodity, it has to be transported within a closed carriage wheel. If it is not, it can withstand any vagaries of nature. It can be transported in a open carriage system. We have excellent evidences of wheels, hubbed wheels, spoked wheels, indicated by painted patterns, not the real spoke patterns. We have hollow toy cart frames, we have solid toy cart frames, provisions for fitting the wooden frames. So these are all very good evidences. These clearly indicate the kind of transport system that could have existed during the Harappan civilization, and they were directly copying it into the toy cart frames or the toy carts, which were used by the children for playful things, and creating an indirect evidence for us to understand the transport system. And we also understand from the street system. If we look into one of the excavated streets of Mohenjo-daro, it was so wide, nearly 10 meters, 9.3 to 9.7 meter in width, So that is the width of one of the broadest streets in Mohenjo-daro, where one can see, I mean, rows of bullock carts. It can be very easily transported. I mean, it can travel very easily one between another. So that is the kind of elaborate street system we find. We have broader streets, we have smaller streets depending upon the urban center. As I told you earlier, the covered carriages, it could have been used for men and material that require protection, that require elaborate protection. Otherwise, if there is any rain or any dust storm, these products will be affected. So they had a very good understanding of the local needs and necessities, and accordingly they decided their transport network also. So if we look into the other kind of systems, they have river transport system also. That is also another internal trade, because all these sites, most of the sites, they are located along the river valleys, either on the Indus River or the Saraswati River or on the main river systems, and goods can be very easily transported between these cities with the river boats. And modern examples of river boats are very easily delineated, available from the Indus rivers. One such example is shown here, how a flat based river boat from Indus with an elaborate arrangement which can be used for transporting goods, and a similar model is available from a site like Harappa. You can see the flat based clay model which is available from Harappa, which is an indication of a river transport system. And another interesting example which is available from not from an archaeological context but from a chance find in Pakistan is this cow boat, I mean, which is also depicted here, which is a very elaborate system where a cow is modeled in the form of a boat and used for transportation. So all these kind of things help us in understanding. And we also have the evidence of a dockyard in Lothal. Lothal, if you look into the dockyard of Lothal, it's an elaborate, broad, rectangular system in which smaller boats could have come from the main canal and docked here. And we have evidence of copper ingots from Lothal. It is also shown here how a copper ingot, complete copper ingot, it could have been traded, because this type of ingots, they are very pure in copper, and which can be ultimately melted and used for producing various kind of artifacts. So if we look into other evidence from Lothal, we also have a clay model of a high prowed sea vessel. Again, that is also an indication of a long distance trade, because there is a clear delineation, clear difference between a river vessel and a sea vessel. So these things are clear indications and substantiated for the dockyard of Lothal. If we come to the inter-regional trade, I mean, survey of various raw materials and scientific analysis, it indicates the provenance. I mean, it helps us to understand from which particular site these raw materials came and how it could have been exploited. So that's how we are in a better position to understand certain products came from Gujarat, certain products came from Balochistan, certain products came from Rajasthan. It is based on some scientific analysis. And that's how we understand Gujarat is the main source of agate carnelian. That is the best quality available in the entire Indus civilization, which was exploited extensively. Similarly, copper was exploited from Rajasthan sources. Also, some Omani sources also are possible. Again, these are all will be substantiated by extensive scientific studies like isotopic analysis, which will help in understanding the exact provenance of these raw materials, and ultimately we can understand the pattern of exploitation of raw materials, from which region it flowed into another region, and how the dynamism could be. If we look into the overall documentation, because we now have an extensive documentation of raw materials available from various regions, and now we can have a better understanding what kind of raw materials they are available from which region. For example, you can see is a tan grey chert. That is the chert variety which is available from Rohri Hills in Sindh, and the nearest sites are Mohenjo-daro, Khod Diji and Channu-daro. They could have helped in exploitation of this chert variety, which was extensively used by the Harappans all across. It was used to produce long parallel sided blades, scrapers, drill bits, cubical weights, etc. Similarly, there is a tabulation here. You can see a continuous tabulation of various materials which is presented here. One can very clearly understand how different sites of the Harappan civilization helped in exploiting raw materials available in different regions and ultimately promoting the inter-regional trade and promoting a competition among the inter-regional trade, and ultimately one region could have been dominating other region for a certain period of time, then another region dominated, and that's how a competitive economy developed. Ultimately that contributed for the urbanism in the Indus civilization. And looking further, we have other evidences also. If you look into the other evidence documented here, like steatite, then Vesuvianite grossular, alabaster, all these materials were documented, and the raw materials have been identified from these different sources, and what kind of materials have been manufactured from these sources. We are now in a better position to understand the various metal that were exploited. Then lapis lazuli, which is another material which was exploited by the Indus civilization people, which is available only from the Badakhshan region in Afghanistan, and the nearest site is Shotugai. So there is a kind of a mechanism developed by the Indus people to locate sites very close to the raw material sources so that they can exploit the raw materials very effectively and contribute them. So this trade could have been controlled by the influential merchants. It is not like a individual is controlling this trade. It is a kind of a guild, it is a kind of an administrative setup, it is a kind of a group of merchants they could have controlled in association with administrative leaders. So these kind of transactions, they were transporting some material from one region to another, and this could have been authenticated or enabled with the use of seal impressions. We see several examples of seal impressions, and we see on the seals 10 different animal appear on seals as the motif. Each animal motif could have represented a particular guild or a particular tribe or a particular clan which kind of dominated a particular trade mechanism. For example, unicorn is the most prominent motif which occupies nearly 60 to 65% of the seals, followed by buffalo. So this could be very good indicator of the clan based or a tribe based or a prominent merchant based economy driving them and ultimately controlling a major share. We have other depictions also on the emblem, like humped bull is there, elephant is there, rhino, water buffalo, short-horned, humpless bull, goat, antler, but they are very rare. But unicorn and buffalo, they are the most important thing on the seals. And the impressions, it also indicates on different materials on which the wet clay was applied and then it was used. The internal trade, it was very much helpful, very much influential during the initial stages, and ultimately on the emergence of urbanism, they also ventured into far away distant places that led to the establishment of an external trade. And external trade, it develops around 2500, 2600 BCE, and we know very well from the Mesopotamian evidences, because we have Indus texts which is not deciphered. But with the deciphered text from the Mesopotamian region, we know a good deal about the trade between the Harappans and the Mesopotamians. So we know the context from the cuneiform text. Cuneiform is the kind of inscription available from the Mesopotamian period, and it mentions regions known as Dilmun, Magan and Meluha. 3 different regions, and materials coming from 3 different regions are coming into the Mesopotamia. And Sarganath occurred, datable to the 23rd century BCE. He mentions ships coming from these different regions. They are entering into his dockyard in Akkad. So Dilmun is identified with the island of Bahrain, the Magan is identified with Oman, and Meluha with the Indus civilization. And we have a variety of materials mentioned in the cuneiform inscription, and there are nearly 76 citations which mention various objects coming from the Meluhan region. What are these objects? If we look into the table, we know there are various materials ranging from stone and pearls, woods and plants, animals, various kind of ships style objects, all these kind of things are coming. And interestingly, if we look into the table, Carnelian, it has 8 attestations. It indicates the domination of Carnelian as a trade. Then among the wood, there are 12 attestation of a kind of wood known as Giz Abba Meluha. So these kind of things indicate the kind of trade existed between the Harappans and the Mesopotamians, and wood is not available from the archaeological context. So from these inscriptions we try to understand what could be the mechanism, what could be the materials exchange between the Harappans and the Mesopotamians. So we have hallmark Harappan objects coming from the Mesopotamian region. One is the long barrel cylindrical beads, another is the etched cornelian beads. These long barrel cylindrical beads are nearly 3 to 4 inches often in length, and the etched cornelian beads, they are single-eyed, double-eyed, triple-eyed, multiple complex patterns, and these are all very hallmark, and cuneiform inscriptions mention about them. And we have also material evidence of manufacture of long cylindrical beads coming from Channudada, Dholavira and other sites. And these finished products, they are also found from Ur, Kish in Mesopotamia, Susa, Jalalabad and Marlik in Iran. So these are very good evidence, direct evidence indicating the Harappans trading with the Mesopotamians. Looking into other aspects, like there are also these kind of objects available from various regions. We have complete wastebands coming from the Indus context, the Allahabadina, Mohenjo-daro and Harappa. And also these kind of single beads, broken beads are found from various other sites. And interestingly, replica of these beads are also found. The long barrel beads, we have replica in terracotta and faience also from Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, Dholavira and Surkotada. And interestingly, one particular bead, terracotta bead from Surkotada, it has a very good red color slip applied over them. So the lower strata of the society, they could not afford this exotic material, and they could afford only a terracotta bead painted in red, duplicating a long barrel cylindrical beads. So other evidences is the etched cornelian beads, which is also exotic in nature and found from many sites. Like the list, there's a long list. It is ranging from Iran to lower Mesopotamia to upper Mesopotamia, and even in sites from Oman. So this is a kind of indication of an extensive trade. And also we have certain kind of this raw material, the long barrel cylindrical beads coming from sites in Syria. Syria is located far away from the Persian Gulf. Nearly 400 to 500 kilometers separates from the Persian Gulf. So from a site known as Mari in Syria, there is an excellent evidence of long barrel cylindrical beads. In the next slide, we can see that the necklace between lapis lazuli and long barrel cylindrical beads, they are combined together. It's a necklace is found. And another thing is the reserved slipped ware pot, that is also from Mari. This reserved slipped ware pot, it is a hallmark pottery of the Kutch region of Harappan civilization. This is a clear indication that the Harappans actually were trading. Harappans actually from moving from this region to that region, carrying even ceramics along with them. If you look into other objects, what are the other objects? Even faience beads are found, shell inlays, then figurines of doves, the limestone collection, and even cubical weight. These are also found from Mesopotamian sites. These are all a clear indication of the long distance trade, external trade of the Harappans. So if we look into the next slide, we also have the seals, even seals from Nippur, sealing from Tel Umma, and various kind of objects from sites known as sites like Ur and other sites. It's a clear indication of the long distance trade. Even sites in Oman, like Ras Al Jeans is a site in Oman. It has yielded a typical Harappan pottery, a red slipped Harappan pottery with a black color decoration, copper seal, and a shade of black slip jar with a conical bottom with a 4-letter Harappan script. That is the hallmark. 4-letter Harappan script on a black slip jar from a site in Oman. So Oman was an important intermediary region where the Harappans were trading, and they were going to the Mesopotamia. They were replenishing their material, replenishing their vessels and other things. So it was a kind of outpost. Even it could have been an outpost of the Harappan trade, Harappan commodities, Harappan merchants traveling from region to region. So these kind of evidence are clearly indicating of the long distance trade, and the clinching evidence comes from a cylinder seal from the time of Sargon of Akkad. It clearly shows a Meluhan interpreter. You can see the small figure sitting on a lap of the king, Sargon of Akkad, encircled by this yellow ring. He is seated on the king, and he is an interpreter. What is the necessity of an interpreter in a foreign country? Because the Harappan people, they were present in the court of Sarganath occurred, and the interpreter is translating whatever the Harappans they are telling, Harappan traders and merchants they are telling to the local king. So this is a clear indication of the presence of Harappans. So these are all evidences, and other evidences. What is the kind of things coming from the Mesopotamia? If we are telling that the Harappans they were sending their goods, what is the kind of evidence from the Mesopotamian region? Some of them are listed here. One is the Persian Gulf time seals found from Mohenjo-daro, Lothar and Cannudaro, and Indus variety of cylinder seals. I mean, cylinder seals, they are the hallmark of the Mesopotamian region, but copying them, we have 2 or 3 examples available from Mohenjo-daro, Kalibanga, Sibri and Rakhigarhi. Then we have one more evidence, that is barrel shaped weights, that is of the Mesopotamian type, that is available from Mohenjo-daro and Harappa. And there are smaller objects like there's a toilet set comprising a ear scoop, piercer and a needle, that is found from Ur and Kishan. It is reported from the late levels of Harappa. So these kind of evidences also indicate the reverse trade, that is objects coming from Mesopotamian region to Harappan region. To sum up, to look into the overall scenario, if we plot all the sites from Mesopotamian region where the Harappan goods are found, it's a clear indication that the Harappan goods are found in many places, which is a clear indication of a long external trade that was supplemented, that was complemented by a very long internal trade, inter-regional trade, which ultimately helped in the establishment of this external trade. And that was also one of the reason for the prosperity of the Harappan civilization, Indus Valley civilization. Ultimately, it collapsed around 1900, 1800 BC. That could be one of the reasons of the demise of the Harappan civilization. And I hope you people have learnt some of the important aspects of the urbanism and Indus trade. And for further details, you can contact the log into the ePathshala website to know the more details about other modules and other related aspects. Thank you.